Local history. Local culture. Local events. Your community. This is the Joe Kelly Show.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. The state senator is our guest, Joe Griffo. He represents the 47th Senatorial District, and that is parts of Oneida, Lewis, and all of St. Lawrence County, if I got that right.
You do.
Yeah. Now let me see if I can get this right. Last time I got this wrong. No more deputy minority leader, but now you are the assistant.
Right. Yeah, I stepped down from the deputy role, which I was selected by my peers, but they wanted me to continue in leadership, so I agreed to do it in this capacity.
You know, what the thing was, when you were as the deputy, you know parliamentary procedure pretty well, which is so complicated, but you knew it well, and you were behind the podium many times.
Yeah, I was presiding officer many times, and it's a challenge when you do that because you have to maintain the decorum of the chamber and the balance, as well as to fulfill the agenda of the majority, and that's who designates the presiding officer, because that sits in the absence of the lieutenant governor, who is the temporary presiding officer, or the presiding officer of the Senate. It goes to the temporary president of the Senate, who designates a member of the Senate. So now, as deputy, though, leader, I had to be on the floor all the time, too. So this gives me more opportunity to do more things that I want to do relative to our community needs, as well as whatever my personal responsibilities may be.
We've got a new governor. I know you've written to her. We'll talk about that, about a couple of the issues you've written to her about. But have you met her?
Well, yeah, I know Governor Hochul. When I met her before she was running for governor, lieutenant governor, then obviously as lieutenant governor, particularly as the presiding officer of the Senate, because sometimes she'd be there and I would go up after her, or vice versa. And I got to know her, and she visited our area a number of times. In fact, she was here probably 2 weeks before the resignation of the ex-governor, Cuomo, and was in Utica and Rome, and we spent like 2 or 3 hours with her that day in anticipation that there was probably going to something was probably happening in the very near future, and happened even quicker than we thought. So yeah, we have we know each other and have a good rapport. But like in anything, there's still different branches of government, the executive and the legislature, and we're going to differ from policy and politics.
We'll talk about why you've been contacting her recently in just a second. But how do you think, you mentioned Governor Cuomo, how do you think that is is it over with him now, or is the legislature still going to do something?
Well, it's over from the fact that he's resigned, obviously, and the Assembly committee that would look at impeachment has issued a report, and they've concluded that they will not take any further action. There was always question as to whether they could once somebody's left office. There is legislation that would allow that to take place. I'm not sure that you'll see that acted upon. So I think from a governmental perspective, it's done. From a criminal justice perspective, I'm not sure, because the sheriff of Albany County has issued charges based upon their investigation. I'm not sure what the DA had, I think, a little difference of opinion, so I'm not sure what will happen there. But as you can see, there's a lot of tentacles. We're on TV today, and you see now CNN has suspended his brother Chris. And I think if you look at what is being presented, there are some real questions as to how they conducted themselves and what was appropriate or not. So I think this is still going to go on, but it won't be from this political governmental perspective. It will be more from a criminal justice perspective now, and then outside in the media.
You know, I was kind of, I don't know what the right word is, fascinated maybe. Here, he was just resigned, but somebody on his team is floating the fact that he may run for Attorney General again.
Well, he can run for anything, because as long as he wasn't impeached, he's not barred from seeking office. So there's a possibility, and if you saw that with the ex-Governor Spitzer, too, who tried to run for comptroller of the city of New York after he was out of office. So a lot remains to be determined. I mean, obviously, he is said that he has done nothing wrong. You have a number of individuals who have come forward in the Attorney General's report. Now you have criminal justice system looking into this. So it's going to be fluid, but from a perspective of governance, obviously his time is done, and now it is Governor Hochul. And it's kind of interesting, that relationship too, because he selected her, obviously, but then she's indicated that they really didn't have a good relationship. And lieutenant governors have traditionally not been utilized the way probably they could and should. But this is all very intriguing from that in that perspective.
You wonder why well, I mean, there's political reasons, but why a governor, why a president would get involved to have a vice president or lieutenant governor with somebody they don't care for.
Well, a lot of it now is just checking boxes, Joe, unfortunately, right? You need to look at balances from geographic, philosophy, and a lot of other factors that come into it. So I don't know, a lot of times that they select the individual that they may really want as opposed to what they feel they need. But in that end, you still would find somebody that you can work with and want to involve in the day-to-day activities. And I think that's wrong. And we've seen relationships that have worked, even nationally, from a national level, president, vice president. There are ways and constructs that really would be beneficial to not only the individuals, but to the governance that has to be undertaken.
He's on my mind because I went to his wake the other day, and I guess I just missed you. You were there earlier, and that was former Utica Councilman Howard Welch's wake. And it seems to me that back then, that politics were so much more civil and so much. When I was at the OD, I covered local government. Howard Welch, always a gentleman, always respectful. It just seemed a different time, yeah?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think what we've seen in contemporary society, and I attribute a lot of this to social media, to 24-hour news cycles. I mean, everyone now is empowered, and it's good to have opinions, but we need to base a lot of this on fact, too. So unfortunately, this has led, in my opinion, to more polarization and divisive behavior, where before you could disagree, but still be amicable. And I think there's still some cases of that. And you look historically in our nation, we've seen that throughout our history. But more recently, I think it's more troubling that not only do people disagree, but they dislike one another. And there are actually efforts to destroy one another. And I think that's really not in the best interest of the community, the state, the nation, but most importantly, all the people. And again, nobody's saying that you should disavow your political beliefs or philosophy or moral positions. It's just that we need to find ways to hold true to your beliefs, but to do it in a way where we can respect one another too, in my opinion.
When we come back, we'll talk about your contact with the governor and why you've been writing her. State Senator Joe Griffo is our guest. Short break, right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Joe Griffo is our guest. He's a state senator, former mayor of Rome, and former Oneida County executive, but he's been state senator since 2007?
Correct.
You wrote a letter recently to the governor, Hochul, and you mentioned the alarming, I think the word alarming was in your letter, amount of violence that's going on in prisons. What caused you to write the letter, and has she responded?
She hasn't responded yet, but I think it was important to put this in writing. I mean, obviously we can communicate this directly to, and we've spoken to the administrative staff at the Department of Corrections. This is unacceptable. I mean, not only has there been violence, but it's been brutality. If you've looked at the most recent case, the female showed photos, and it's unacceptable. So what I've asked the governor to do is three things. First, to conduct an investigation and do it through the Inspector General's office, not just through the Department of Corrections, to find out what's going on and why. Secondly, to release publicly all the data that she has that was utilized in the determination to close prisons, because I believe that these are bad decisions to close these places, because we still have problems like double bunking. We don't have a secure vendor program where people can directly mail, family to the inmates. So I think that's another issue. And then finally, I just think that we need to look at this comprehensively. Relative to other policies that have gone wrong, like bail changes that obviously are not working but are being ignored. So I think it's imperative that you look at the prison closures, what happened and why. We look at the situation, these acts that are taking place that are unfortunate and unacceptable. And then also the head of the Department of Corrections has served as an acting commissioner for 8 years. You need to have a permanent head there. Now, I'm going to tell you my own belief as to why. It's because he's credentialed and has the qualifications to run that department, and he's a career public servant in that area. The problem is he's making more money as deputy, so they elevated him to acting. But that also is unacceptable because we have a construct and structure of government. And if you want to be the head of that department, you need to take the job commensurate with whatever the position pays.
So if he were to become
he'd make less money if he were the commissioner. So I think that's why they put him in as acting commissioner, but he's running the place. But it sends the wrong message to people. And I'm not saying that you should look at compensation for all the department heads either. But the point is, which could and may take place, but I just think this sends the wrong message generally to say you got a qualified guy. I understand why he doesn't want to take it, but that's still wrong because you don't have a permanent head. So why do you need permanent heads? And it circumvents the advice and consent of the governance process through the Constitution, where the governor nominates and the Senate confirms. So
you have no say on him right now.
No say.
Okay.
Right.
Speaking of prisons, it was announced recently that there was going to be, was it 3 or 6 prisons around the state that was?
At least 3. I'm not sure. I think there were more. There was authority granted to the governor to do this, the last governor as well as this governor. Again, my concern there is that if you look at some of the policies and the cost associated with the Department of Corrections, are we making the right decisions by closing these facilities? The other issue, and they use statistical data to say, well, there's less people there, but they still haven't ended double bunking. Maybe you could make this safer if you logistically laid this out differently too, for both the inmate as well as the correctional officer or support staff. So I just think that you got to look at this comprehensively, and before you say let's close these. And then another thing is attributed to policies, criminal justice policies that are being enacted. And again, there's a difference of philosophy. This is a downstate centric legislature dominated right now by one political party with a particular philosophy. I don't agree that the bail, I know there was reforms needed, but the changes have not, they've shown that they're ineffective and they're causing problems. When you keep releasing the same individuals who continue to commit crimes. So obviously, nobody's going into these facilities, and the courts have been closed because of the pandemic. So that's also exasperated the whole situation.
There was a story in the New York Post the other day, and I forget what his crimes were. They weren't major crimes, but this gentleman was arrested 3 times within 36 hours and released.
Well, you had the most recent incident right here, an individual from Texas who came up here and within 2 or 3 days had been arrested several times and continued to commit crimes.
Yeah. Is that ever going to get changed?
It needs to be changed. It's going to be interesting because I think it'll be part of the political debate over the next election cycle. And I don't know. I think you might see modifications because of fear of the electorate because really if you poll this and talk to people, you know that they want to see this thing changed because they want to have a safer community. But if there's anything, it would be tweaks. It would only be done because they want to continue to sustain their governing majorities. But I think philosophically they don't agree that it should be changed. And I think that's the core issue that people need to understand, and that's a message that should resonate as people make choices next year, that whatever's done may not be a real reflection of the policy of the individuals who are presenting and acting upon these. So you got to know who you're supporting and who you're embracing, because this is the consequence of that action.
You're in the minority. How much in the minority is the Republican Party in
Well,
your
there's
state?
a supermajority right now. It's out of 63 members in the Senate, there's 43 Dems and 20 Republicans.
What do you see happening? I was listening to somebody on the radio the other day nationally who was saying that he thinks because of things that have happened in the country that there's going to be a big change in the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives.
I think you'll see that based upon what you're hearing from people. You know, I'm not a political pundit. You'd have to talk to Zogby and people like that right now to get a better idea where the sentiment is, and things will change over through the months. But I think people are really upset. They're fearful because of what they see happening in their communities, the rise in crime, the cost, the burdens that are being put upon people, the lack of access to certain types of supplies, the continuation of the pandemic. I mean, these are all factors, I think, that are going to make people want to see some change. Now, what that translates to, I'm not sure ultimately, and the type of candidates that will be presented. But I think divided government works. The bottom line is, like in New York, when we had divided government, there was checks and balances. And you still were able to deliver results because people were forced to compromise and to do something to govern as opposed to position themselves politically.
When we come back, we also, you mentioned the Department of Corrections acting person because they failed to act on that. There's also legislation that passed, your legislation, that has been sitting there for a long time, and they're not acting on that, even though it's law, correct?
Correct.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk about that. Senator Griffo is our guest. Short break, right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. State Senator Joseph Griffo is our guest. We're talking about a variety of issues before the state legislature. But
So
before
can I?
Yes, of course.
Go ahead, and then I'll
All right.
just.
Well, hang on to your thought. I wanted to ask you how you did with that cell phone project that you do every year, number one, and number two, is there still time for people to get in on it?
There is. You still have another week, and if you just check various websites, you can know where to go with the drop-off. Very important program. It's going to help service men and women across the world, basically, our men and women who are in the military. So if you got an unused device, please bring it in, and we have till December 11th.
And it gives, what it does is it gives you the ability to give those servicemen and women cards to call home, right?
Allows them to get calling cards because there's still cost associated with this, depending on where they're assigned and where their tour is. And this will allow them to communicate with their family and friends.
Yeah. Greeley Ford was involved with that, was he not?
AT&T is a co-sponsor. We've taken this on here locally, and AT&T has been a great partner. We're working this year with the Comets as well as the Veterans Outreach Center. So we've got a lot of good partners and a lot of great locations throughout the whole Oneida County area.
Before I asked you that question, I cut you off. You were going to say something.
Well, I want to just compliment you because you are very humble, and he would not say this, but we actually had a ceremony recently where we were recognizing It's called the Senate Medal Accommodation, where we acknowledge and recognize individuals who throughout their lives and careers have made significant contributions to people in our community. And you were one of our recipients, so I want to say congratulations and again, thank you for all your past and present work on behalf of people.
Well, that was nice of you to point that out. Thank you. The Gaming Commission, legislation was passed, your legislation, and it gave people the ability to use credit cards for raffles, and there was another aspect of it which I forgot.
So basically right now, state law does not allow you to use anything but cash. And if you think about it, when you're conducting these raffles, it's kind of, do you really want people moving cash around? So we came up with, I was a co-sponsor of the bill, to allow the use of credit cards, debit cards, things of that nature. And if you think about it twofold, it would benefit places like the Children's Miracle Network here, that we were approached by Citron, a number of people who had these great endeavors but wanted a different way to be able to generate that income, all for worthy causes. And beyond that, now you're in a pandemic. When you're telling people, you know, you don't want to get, when you were home, there was still going to be a way or an opportunity to allow this transaction to happen. But the this was passed in 2017, and we gave the Gaming Commission and signed it into law by the governor, and we gave them 6 months to promulgate regulations. And here we are, they finally last July put some things out, but they never adopted anything. And now they're revisiting what their regulations were to govern the industry and the practice, and it's 4 years and we don't have anything. Now their excuse is, well, we waited for mobile sports betting. That's an excuse. To me, 4 years after a law was put into place that told you need to implement this and you still haven't done it is a reflection on the Gaming Commission and their ineffectiveness, in my opinion. It's law. I guess the thing that boggles my mind is if you got a law, it's been appropriately passed and signed into law, and yet a state agency can just ignore it? Well, drag their feet. Basically use excuses, drag their feet. And the Gaming Commission really is a concern to me. I mean, we saw that in how they selected casinos. I mean, remember the Southern Tier Casino came out of Rochester? I mean, if anybody knows geography, I don't know anybody would put Rochester in the Southern Tier. But the Rochester area. But I just think that there's a lot of issues there, and I would hope that the new governor will look to put new people on the Gaming Commission and to restructure this, because I don't believe they work as well as they could and should. There are problems with Vernon Downs, the relationship between Gorell and the Gaming Commission, and he's pointed out, rightly so, where the former governor took certain donations and then certain decisions were made. So I just think that they need to start all over again there, and they need to do their job and to do it the way it should and could be done.
Redistricting. What's going on with that? There was something on the ballot. I know when I went to vote this year, there were 4 things.
So this is very complicated. I'll just give you the quick version. We 10 years ago, and every 10 years you have to redistrict. And 10 years ago, we heard the voices of the people say, we don't like the way this is being done. It's being done politically. We call it gerrymandering. Needs to stop. So we put together a new approach, a bipartisan commission, nonpartisan approach to drawing lines. It was supposed to start this year, during this last census. The problem is the new majorities realized that they wouldn't have a lot of control in that, so they tried to tweak it through another constitutional amendment under the guise of good government, but really there were a lot of changes in it that would have made it to their advantage. So rightly, we were able to engage people, educate people, and fortunately they defeated it. Now the legislature had passed a bill which was an ace in the hole, basically knowing that if this thing gets defeated, we have something else. The essence of this bill is just that all information that this commission compiles has to be given to the legislature in the event they can't make a decision. The problem with that is this gives them the opportunity, if I were using a sports analogy now, to have a delay a game. So essentially, there's no incentive to do something. So if you want to, it could be a tactic to stall and not to come to an agreement and then to force this to go to the legislature. And then when that happens, it's the majority party controlling it and they'll get to draw the lines.
So they can do it, get right back to where we were.
Correct.
Always good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Maybe you can come in before the session starts, the next session starts.
It'd be great to do that and also host you again in Albany, hopefully.
Well, we'll do a show down there again. I'd like to.
Sounds
Thanks.
good. Happy holidays.
Well, double back at you, too. That's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back next week. We'll do it all again. Don't forget CNYHomepage.com. Lots of good stuff there. Until next time, take care of yourself, everybody.